the Last Minute Blues podcast with Alex Ferrario, Donny Fandango, and Jeremy Rutherford on your home of the St. Louis Blues, 101 ESPN.
It is the Last Minute Blues podcast. We are live in the Jeff Burton studios. Donny Fandango joined by my dude Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN. Sitting diagonally from me, from The Athletic, Mr. Jeremy Rutherford. Now, guys, as always, we got a lot to talk about. We got a lot to get into. And I was just told not very long ago that the best way for this podcast to take off is for us to get right into our business at hand right when the podcast starts.
Okay, let's talk about my daughter then today.
But I have this that I have to mention here real quick. My radiothon to benefit the Ronald McDonald House Charities of St. Louis starts tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. and goes until Friday at 2 p.m. All right, I will be on the air all of those hours with the exception of the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift. I'm going home and going back to bed for a few hours.
Very smart.
I'm getting old, so I mean, it's necessary. But again, if you hear this podcast today or early tomorrow and could be a part of the radiothon, it's a lot of fun. We play a lot of goofy stuff, but song requests, business plugs, and it all goes to an absolutely incredible charity here in St. Louis, the Ronald McDonald House Charities of St. Louis. We've raised over $500,000, I believe, in like 10 or 11 years with these guys, and we want to keep it going.
Good job,
so
buddy.
please be a part if you can, if you're out there. Again, like I feel like a lot of us know somebody that benefited from the Ronald McDonald House or some of the things that they have going on in hospitals, and I just think it's a really great charity. So
Absolutely.
If folks wouldn't mind helping out, we would greatly appreciate it.
Beat your record. What was the record you set last year?
No, the record wasn't last year. The record was a couple of years ago when I made the announcement that I wasn't going to do it anymore.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And we did $95,000.
All right, so this is the last one Donnie is ever going to do. So you got to beat 95,000.
But last year we did 65.
That's awesome.
So, you know, man, it's a little taxing because it takes a lot out of me. But again, it goes to a really great cause. So anybody that can help out, really appreciate it.
Love that.
So one of the things that we had so much to talk about last week with the Blues.
Like an hour and 10 minutes of an episode.
Yeah, no lunch break.
Jared was dying. By that third piece of it, Jared was done.
I thought we were going to Uber Eats at some point.
You go back and watch, JR's eyes were glazed over.
Yeah.
Dude, that's fantastic. I also think it would be hilarious if like an Uber Eats person just comes in and like sets down 2 huge bags of food for us.
Uber Eats, we're looking for you.
But, you know, we had talked about all of the things that the Blues had done in the last week and a half, which was a lot. So I kind of wanted, before we talked about free agency in the NHL and some of the big trades and things, I just kind of wanted to get an idea from you guys on how you feel about the offseason and the team as it stands at this point. Obviously, I don't think there's probably going to be any major free agent signs. You know, the roster is probably going to look pretty similar to this once the season starts. But I just kind of wanted to get a gauge from you guys on where you thought the Blues were at this point in the offseason.
So I've thought a lot about this because people keep bringing it up, saying they're the most improved team in the Western Conference. And I don't know if you could say they're the most improved team, but tell me if this is a bold take. To me, this was the most successful offseason for the Blues since the 2019 one where they brought in O'Reilly and Bozak and Maroon and Perron. The only reason I say that is because like they've made minor moves. Like, I think the Pavel Buchnevich one was in the offseason, so that was a pretty decent move, but that was the only one that they did. They kept the roster the same. They did a lot of selling off in other off seasons. They did some minor signings. This is the first time since that 2019 offseason that they shifted their entire roster. Like, you brought in 3 new faces for your top 9. You brought in potentially a top 4 defenseman. You've now created more competition for some of your younger players, and just looking at like what McTavish and what Thomas and what Dvorsky could be, I mean, that could be one of the deepest center depth rosters that you've seen in the Western Conference this year. So, I mean, I think they are one of the most improved teams this season in the National Hockey League for what they've done. Now, I say all of that to say, but there's a lot of ifs that go into it. Like, I can say this, but if McTavish doesn't work out, if McMichael doesn't work out, if Carlo doesn't work out, well, then this offseason pretty much puts you back a couple of years. But I I'm under the impression that I think these guys are going to thrive with a new change of scenery. And man, like when you look around the Western Conference, it's hard to see other teams that made this drastic of a shift to their identity than what the Blues did.
Yeah, I think the Blues obviously were able to make more moves and have more turnover and change the look of the team for one reason. And that reason was those long-term contracts, talking about Braden Shen, Justin Falk, Torrey Krug, Nick Leddy, there's a lot of them, right? And so 2-3 years ago, you just couldn't move them. I mean, of course, you put Leddy on waivers, he was picked up, but you had to wait until there was just 1 or 2, maybe 3 years left on a couple of these deals, and then now they become more intriguing to teams. You see Detroit trade for Falk, the Islanders trade for Braden Shen, and what happens? You get first-round draft picks for those guys, and then you're able to take a couple of those picks and turn them into Mason McTavish. So I just think that of all the last few off seasons, you finally got to a point where the team wasn't handcuffed. And hey, listen, be honest, the team handcuffed itself, right?
Yeah.
By signing the players those long-term contracts. But yeah, so I think that finally got to a point. But I know we'll get into it, Donnie, here, but you like what they've done. They've brought in another young guy who can be part of the core in a Mason McTavish. The Carlo deal, he fills in on the defense, brings a veteran experience, 1 year left on the deal, so it's not a long-term commitment. And, and they've filled in some other holes with Connor McMichael replacing essentially Jordan Kyrou. So, I think that everybody looks at the roster and says, yes, this is some good turnover. This is some good change. But like Alex wrapped up his answer, you still got to see on some of these guys, see how they play.
Is this the closest resemblance to what the coach wants from his roster with the players? Like, is this as close of the team has been to this is the identity and the players match that identity that they've had in some time? Because like over the last few years, they've wanted to be fast, and there's only been a couple of guys that are fast. They've tried to kind of revert it back to being big, and they just haven't had the right pieces to do that. But now when you've brought in McTavish, when you've brought in McMichael, when you've brought in Carlo, has that shifted now back to looking at it saying like this identity resembles what the Blues want to be, probably as best as they've done in about 5 years?
Yeah, and I think because the roster had a lot of those contracts that I just talked about, you're locked in. You can't really change it. You might bring in a new coach, Jim Montgomery, and he says, wow, I'd really like to have a couple guys who do this, a couple guys, okay, good luck. How are you going to trade those guys? So I think it's as close as it's been to maybe what they want to do. However, it's still going to take piece by piece. Like if you want to be a little, more aggressive in front of the net, okay, now you got a McTavish, now you got a McMichael who, not as big as McTavish, but he can play that way. Now you got a big body in Carlo. He's not, physical, overly physical type guy. So I think you're inching closer there, but it's still going to take another year or two, I think, to be able to revamp the roster enough where you get it to the point where Jim Montgomery goes, okay, this is what I need.
Yeah.
What worries you when you look at the roster of this team?
Secondary scoring still. I said just a little bit ago, like I think you could have one of the best center depths in the Western Conference, but that's if it works out. Right. I like the idea of having a McMichael now with a guy like McTavish potentially. I think that opens up the possibility for what Pavel Buchnevich can do. Now Dalibor Dvorsky isn't under the pressure of being a number 2 center. Right. But I say all of this to say, yeah, but you're bringing in 2 unknowns in McMichael and McTavish. You still have Pavel Buchnevich. Jake Neighbors is still going to try and find offense. And if Thomas Holloway Snuggerud don't create the offense, do they have enough offense beyond that? So, I mean, that's going to be there until I see what McTavish looks like, until I see what potentially a McMichael could do for a guy like Pavel Buchnevich, and does that open up some opportunities for Dalibor Dvorsky, and honestly, what the coaching looks like now that you've brought in a couple of new voices. So secondary scoring would probably be the biggest thing that still concerns me about this team.
JR, what about you?
Yeah, like you need Neighbors to be that 25-goal guy. If he's going to play on the third line, you like to see Dvorsky. What did he get, 12 this year?
Yeah.
Does he hover around that 15 mark, and can he set up that line for a little more scoring? And then who is your third line right winger? Is it Bergeron? Is it Otto Stenberg? If so, can Bergeron be consistent? Can Stenberg improve his offensive numbers? So yeah, I agree. Like you look and top 6 looks pretty decent. Top 4 defense looks pretty good. You like the goaltending tandem, but yeah, the problem that we saw with the Blues last year, the number one problem was their top players didn't produce. I mean, that's first and foremost, the Kyrous, Thomases, those guys. But I think that this team, in order to be successful and be in that wild card conversation, they have to get some offense from that third line.
Absolutely. So a question that I've kind of been thinking about, and I would love to say that this was a question that I thought of, but it's not.
Don't give other people credit, Donnie. No. You take it.
Well, yeah, I guess I probably... Yeah, I could have.
Yeah, see, you just called yourself out.
But it was brought to our attention at the draft, this particular question. Jim Montgomery hasn't really coached a team like this Blues team before.
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to be a very young, obviously very young team. I've felt so great about Monty the entire time, and I'm not saying that I don't. But is this a good fit for the coach and for the players?
That's what he was brought in for. Like, I remember that press conference Doug Armstrong held when they hired Jim Montgomery. They said, this is a hire that is going to help our younger guys develop into what we want and then ready to win when they develop. So it was kind of, utilizing Jim Montgomery in both roles. I was with you when we were brought that same question. And so I got to thinking, if you look at that Dallas Stars team, though, that he was coaching, that was a young roster. Like, that was a 21-year-old Rope Hintz. It was a 19-year-old Miro Heiskanen. They had a lot of young pieces on that. Now, they had veteran presence. They had Ben Bishop, and they still had Tyler Seguin, who was older, Jamie Benn there. But, that was somewhat, if you look at that Dallas Stars roster, somewhat similar to where the Blues are at right now, to where they've got a lot of younger guys that are ready to take that step to the NHL. They got a group that wants to compete, and you have to mesh them together. And I mean, Jim Montgomery had a lot of success with Dallas. I think if you look at how Jim wants to coach and has coached with Dallas and Boston, it is not about goal scoring, it's goal suppression. So his success has come from having great goaltenders and having incredible defensive protection. And that's what the Blues have not done, or at least didn't do this past season until the second half. And that's just going to come down to, do the players buy into the style that they want to coach? It's no coincidence you bring in a Greg Cronin who likes that style as well. So I think this team works for Jim, but his success with the Blues is going to be dictated off of Robert Thomas. I'll say now Mason McTavish, these younger guys, Jimmy Snuggerud, Dylan Holloway, Philip Broberg, Joel Hofer, his success is tied to those players. And I think the biggest one that people point to is Robert Thomas. What does it look like in October and November? Because if it looks like what it did in February and March, then he's going to have a team that kind of resembles what that Dallas Stars were in that 18-19 season.
Yeah, I think now that he's been here a couple of years, he was invested from day one, right? But it's tough to be invested when you're inheriting a roster, and just like we talked about,
that you can't do anything with.
Yeah, maybe it's not the style that you want to play, and so eventually it takes a couple years to get there. But now, last year, what was the talk? He had his first full training camp with the team. Now you're 2.5 years into that. You've got some different players, and as Alex touched on, when you have young players whose future and how they play and how the team plays will dictate, if they're staying, what their next contract is going to look like, whether they come together as a team, like the general manager's putting it together, all that stuff becomes a bond. And these guys continue to push forward together. And now their coach, again, I can't say this enough, he was supporting them from day one. Yeah. But now he's even got that, vested interest in developing these players, making them who the guys upstairs think they can be. And then so it just kind of takes off from there. So, to answer your question, I think that Jim Montgomery, yes, he's in a situation now where he can dictate the success and the parts that he's using and putting out there on a nightly basis, he can feel comfortable with. And, listen, 23, 24 years old, these aren't 33-year-olds anymore. Yeah. So these kids are going to be wide-eyed and listening to the coach in any way that they can get
It's
better.
also the first time that he's had an extended stay with a roster because Dallas, of course, the off-ice issues where he was let go, and Boston, he was brought into a team that was trying to win now with Bergeron and Krejci, and we've already discussed he's never been able to hire his own assistant coaches,
which is wild to me,
especially for how long he's been around. But like thinking about the fact that now it's his first time where he's put together his entire staff. It's the first time that he's been with a team long enough to have a roster shaped into the form that he kind of wants it to be. So like this is the part, it is uncharted territory for Jim Montgomery, but it also kind of is exciting because you get to see what Jim Montgomery's truly made of with these guys that they've said, like, this is who we think you can win with.
Absolutely. So let's do this. Let's take a break. Let's come back. Let's talk about things around the NHL, including, guys, I have been dying to talk to you about Leo Carlsson and the situation between Philadelphia and Anaheim. I was going to group text it, but I was like, nope, we got to save it for the content. So we'll come back. The second segment of the Last Minute Blues podcast on the way next. Sunday, I'm at home, minding my own business, scrolling through the IG, the Insta, as the kids would say.
The gram.
And I see the story about an offer sheet from the Philadelphia Flyers to the Anaheim Ducks young star Leo Carlsson. 5 years, $18 million, which will make Leo Carlsson the highest paid player in the National Hockey League. So a few things here to talk about. One, the offer sheet in and of itself, and Daniel Briere and the Philadelphia Flyers having some big stones to do this in the first place. But also what's so fascinating to me about it, guys, is how Leo Carlsson getting $18 million is going to trickle down through the rest of the league and how that's going to affect everybody else and how they get paid. So first of all, I just kind of want to start with this. The Ducks are going to match. They have to match this to keep Leo Carlsson, right?
You would think so. You would think so. I mean, if you don't, where's the team going in the next handful of years?
Step backwards.
You're almost in a rebuild point with as many moves as they've made. You just made the playoffs,
and you got a coach in Joel Quenneville who, how long? I mean, he's going to be around a few years, but he's not going to be around 10, right?
Right.
And so
you bring Joel Quenneville in to win, not to rebuild.
Yeah. So it's interesting, and you know what? You had the offer sheet situation. Was it with Miami and Montreal and Carolina years ago with Kotkaniemi?
Yeah. Well, last year you had Carolina with Keandre Miller and the Rangers.
And so it seems like there's been a storyline with all of these offer sheets, now this one with Philly and Anaheim, where Cutter Gauthier, he wants out of Philly, right? Yep. So he goes to Anaheim. My favorite response on social media with this whole Carlsson offer sheet thing has been Scotty Upshaw. He says, with Cutter Gauthier, he says, okay, bud, hey, listen, now you're either going to be playing with 4 first-round draft picks if they take your guy Carlsson, and if you keep him, guess what, Cutter? Good luck on your next contract. So, the subplot here is Philly sticking it to Cutter Gauthier.
That was the moment I saw it. That was my first thought.
This was
Danny Briere and the Philadelphia Flyers being like, let's stick it to Anaheim and to Cutter Gauthier for what you did.
Now,
obviously, you make your moves to better your team. Yes. That's why you go Carlsson. But you cannot convince me otherwise that behind closed doors they were like, hey, you know what? Let's get Cutter Gauthier back. Because the trickle-down effect is if they match it, that's $18 million. That only leaves them about $6 million, I think, to do the rest of this offseason. And they only have 4 defensemen under contract. They have to sign a couple of defensemen, and Cutter Gauthier cannot go to arbitration and cannot be offer sheeted. It's the same as Nikishin from Carolina. So they match. Gautier's getting a very low contract, at least for this year, and then things open up a little bit more, but they have basically no defensemen, other than about 3 guys, and 2 of them played in the AHL last year, and your roster is going to be without a guy that just scored 40 goals. Then you go down the path of them saying, no, we're not going to match it. Well, now you lose a number 1 center. You have all of this money to use, but there's no center to replace that, and now you are closer to a rebuild. And everyone around the NHL, especially on Anaheim, just saw that Leo Carlsson could make $18 million. Cutter Gautier's got to be like, I just scored 40 goals for you. I can make $18 million. So, I mean, it has completely changed the landscape of restricted free agents.
Because a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about what Cale Makar could make it and would be worth, because I believe that he's up for an extension after this year. If Leo Carlsson is making $18 million, what the hell is Cale Makar making?
Yeah, I think they were already throwing out 20, but he could be a guy who wants to win.
And Colorado's already kind of set that precedent to where like he could make 15 and people will be surprised, but I mean, those guys seem to, guys like Makar and McDavid, those are the ones that take it lesser dollars because they want the cup. Guys like Carlsson, you try and get paid now because you're on a bad team, but I'm also 21 years old, and for the next 5 years I'll make $18 million, and then when I'm 26, then I'll go try and win some Stanley Cups and maybe take a little bit of a pay cut.
Also, I think guys like Makar and McDavid roll out of bed making endorsement money, so they're
Leo Carlsson's not doing that.
So this just popped into my mind. So how many years left does Robert Thomas have on his deal? 2?
Should be. No, that's
5.
Yeah,
It's till
5.
2031.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I was just thinking that that there have got to be guys that are a year or two away that are licking their chops going, or that over the course of the last week and a half, they have dreams of a bigger raise than they already thought that they were going to have before.
Jimmy Snuggerud on the Blues, and you go out and put up 35 to 40 goals this season. Well, now the precedent has been set. Now, Carlson's a center, and those guys get paid a little bit more. But, I mean, now, see, this is the part that interests me, because now as a restricted free agent, like, you don't hold the general manager hostage, but if I'm an agent for a player who's an RFA and offer sheet eligible, why wouldn't I tell him, like, hey, why don't we hold off till July 1st before we sign a contract to see what's out there, right? Because why should you sign the contract if I think you're worth more than this? And, man, if you want to go somewhere and make all of the money in the world, let's wait till we get to the offer sheet territory to see what teams can offer. So that's why, like, I wonder how many teams now view their RFAs as, hey, we got to get this done today. Like, there's no more of this, well, we'll let it play itself out. I wonder if this is, no, let's sign these guys, take the chance that it will pay them, and if for some reason it doesn't turn out well, we took a risk and it didn't work, versus taking the risk of them getting offer sheeted and having a great year and being $15 million players.
And the part that kills me, I think it was Elliot Friedman that had some of the behind the scenes and said that there was a phone call with Carlsson's people and the Ducks just right before the offer sheet was announced. And that's Carlsson asking the Ducks, okay, what's the offer looking like as we stand right now? And they're saying, 12 million, 13, 14 million a year. Well, Carlsson and his agent, as they're saying that, know that they have the $18 million a year offer sheet in their pocket. So the end of that phone call, I'd love to be the fly on the wall, because you go, okay, you sure about this 13 million? Right. Okay, we're going to be talking in a couple of hours.
Well, and I think the report was that Carlsson's side tried to tell Verbeek, like, hey, 15 mil would be comfortable for us, with the understanding that they had the $18 million offer sheet coming. So it's like, Pat Verbeek completely screwed this thing up, because
he overplayed his hand like all over the place, right?
At the deadline, telling everybody, well, we're going to match no matter what, so it doesn't matter if they get an offer sheet. And it's like, dude, I wouldn't be opening your mouth with that, because look what happened. And then the negotiations of, like, hey, $15 million, like, if they knew you're getting an $18 million contract and he wants 15, now you're going to be paying $3 million more for what the guy wanted in the spot.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So Carlsson and his guy said to Anaheim, hey, 15 mil a year, and this bad boy is done.
That's the report from Elliot Friedman, that Anaheim was at 12 to 13 and Carlsson's side was at 15 mil.
So did Verbeek just not think that somebody was going to offer sheet him? Is that really what this is all?
He might have thought there'd be an offer sheet. I doubt he thought that it was going to
be 18 million.
Yeah, they probably
even
thought,
if it comes in at 15, 16, okay, we'll bite the bullet. But
because the threshold is, once you go past, 9 mil or 10 mil, it's 4 first-round picks.
4 first-rounders.
So you're not thinking somebody's going to go to the $18 million mark, you're thinking somebody's going to go $12 million and we'll sign you for what we want you to sign you.
Right.
Or we'll take the 4 first-round picks.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, to go back to your first question, man, I think you kind of have to match it if you're Anaheim. Boy, I think both sides could be screwed if this deal gets done. Because Anaheim, $18 million, you got your guy, but now you got to build your roster around that. For Philly, man, you are taking a risk. Carlsson is not an $18 million player. Half the league isn't an $18 million player. And I know this is how you get guys. This is how you get good players if you're not drafting that high. But your entire roster construction now is going to be dictated off of 18 mil. And they've got Zegras, they've got Drysdale, they've got those guys they're going to have to sign in 2 years, Porter Mertone. They've got Michkov, that's next year. Like, now the precedent will be set of, well, if he's $18 million, then I should be at that. And the cap only goes up so much to where it starts getting very small very quick.
Right. No, you're right. And the cap doesn't, just jump to the point where you can start signing guys for $18 million every other day. But I always look at it like, how much money are the Flyers going to spend trying to find that number one center, whether it be this guy and then that doesn't work, so they bring in another guy and then they bring in another guy. I kind of equate it to with the Blues, like, okay, so you don't want to pay Alex Pietrangelo the extra, $1 million a year, $2 million. Like, let's say he wanted 8.5 and you're stuck at 7.5. Okay, but then you went out and got Scandella and Leddy,
like $20 million on trying to find them.
You're trying to chase it. So, but you're right, it does change the dynamic of the Flyers payroll, and they get some young guys who are going to want to get paid. But I just think that's how the league works. Like, we were so used to it being stagnant with the salary cap because of COVID that now we're getting used to the cap going up $3, $4, $5 million every year. And, in 3 years' time, it's going to be up $15 million. That's why Kaprizov went for $17 million. And in 5 years, I think, $17, $18 million is going to be the norm. And if Carlson's going to be producing, it's going to look like an unbelievable move. Just like, and I know a lot less money, but the Broberg and Holloway. Like, people were freaking out about $4 million for Philip Broberg.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Now you pick him up at the airport for it was only $4 million.
People also freaked out when they gave Colton Parayko that deal. And one of the things that I was, even as a rube that I am, I could tell like that this deal is going to age well. Like, dude's only making $6.5 million now, or whatever the case may be.
Oh yeah, I think by the end of next year, I think our good buddy Dom over The Athletic is going to be writing a piece of the Blues having some of the best value contracts in the NHL. When you think of Thomas, when you think of Holloway and Broberg, all of those guys making under $8.5 million, which, by the way, they're all locked up until 2031.
Man.
And then the only ones you're talking about now are Snuggerud, Neighbors, and Hofer of getting those contracts done. So...
Also, too, not to interrupt you.
No, you're fine.
But it also makes that Hughes fella in Montreal.
Oh, yeah.
The general manager is in Kent Hughes.
Kent Hughes.
It makes him look like a friggin' genius because he's got all of those cats in Montreal locked down for under $10 million.
Under $10 million.
Well, and how about Florida? I mean, Florida's getting all of their players locked in for less than $10 million. Barkov is the highest paid player, and everybody comes in under that, and they're all locked up for at least the next 2 years.
All right, so the last couple of weeks, free agency, trades, boom. It's been crazy in the NHL. What has caught you guys? What has impressed you guys? What has made you go, why are you spending your money that way? Kind of what are some of the highlights and lowlights that you have seen of the last couple of weeks? Because it has been buzzing around the NHL, and I love it. I love it.
Especially the first 3 days of free agency. It's so good. And then you get to the quiet period, but you're always waiting for the next trade. I'll say Edmonton is a team that, hey, good for you guys. You got off of the Darnell Nurse contract, and you brought in a legit goaltender in Frederik Andersen. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but the Maple Leafs are another one that is impressed me. Like, we made fun of the John Chayka hiring, and
I'd like to say, though, to take that off of you guys, that was mainly me. That you guys were being very professional. I was dumping on that dude because he looked like a joke.
Well, I was dumping on it too, for when you look at what his success was in Arizona and how bad that went. But I mean, man, they've shifted that team to where it's like, damn, it actually looks pretty impressive now. You've gotten a little bit more comfort in your goaltending with Bobrovsky. Your defense is okay. I still think it's probably a little shaky, but man, the forward side of things, they're like shifting it towards something that actually can be competitive with their depth right now. So those are two for me that I've looked at and I was like, oh, okay, that's going to be interesting. And then we mentioned it already, and not to sound like the homer, but St. Louis is one that keeps popping up to me, because when you look at the Western Conference, I think if Anaheim matches Carlsson, or if they don't match Carlsson, they're going to take a little bit of a step back because their roster is going to be in all sorts of flux. I think Vegas has taken a little bit of a step back. And then I also think LA has taken a step back. So, man, there's only like 3 teams that I legit think are dangerous in the Pacific Division, and then you've got Utah and St. Louis with the normal 3. So, like, I think this is probably a little bit better for the Blues than what it was last year.
JR, before we get to you, I want to ask you guys about Bob, the Bobrovsky contract in Toronto. Do you have any issue with them giving him 3 years? What is it, $7-8 million per?
Yeah, I think it was $6 or $7 million.
I mean, because he's 38. You know, it didn't have a great year last year. I understand why Toronto would do it, and I'm not saying that they're wrong in doing it, but I'm just curious what you think about paying a guy that when the deal's done, he's going to be in his early 40s, and he's a goaltender on top of it.
Yeah, it's okay. They had to do something, and they didn't have a lot of options, I guess is the best way to say it. Like, who could they have brought in who was reasonably available, and you're not overpaying or what have you, or who could you sign that could come in and bring some stability? I mean, they've had, like, their number one issues are their prima donna players, you know, not producing,
right?
You know, and taking them further than they have in the last 6 or 8 years, and you know that led to Marner leaving, and now questions about Matthews. And in the meantime, like, it feels like every time you turn on a Toronto game, they got a different guy in net. This guy's hurt. You know, this guy is moving on to a different team, and so they needed something. I just don't know that Bob's the answer. Like goaltenders 38, 39, 40, 41, typically, you know.
Unless you're Grand Fuhrer.
Yeah. So tough time. So, you know, is it worth a gamble? I suppose. You know, he played a lot of hockey and obviously had a lot of success the past couple years. I just think it comes back to what other options did they have?
Yeah, I think this is also a succession plan by Toronto, to where they've got a goaltender in their minor league system that just won the Calder Trophy, a Russian goalie, by the way, that they view as the next number one guy for them.
But they still think he's like a year or so away.
Still think he's young. So, like, I think this was the transition of, look, let's have Bobrovsky, who could keep us competitive for this year and maybe next, and then have this young guy be able to work with him so that in a couple of years you can see that normal transition, kind of like what they did with Binnington and Hofer. That was my thought behind it. But to JR's point, there's nothing else. Like, it sounds like they tried to get Binnington, and I don't think they had the assets necessary. We saw Markstrom get traded, and I don't think they were willing to pay that for Markstrom. And then what other goalies were traded or signed? Like, Frederik Andersen is kind of in the same boat as Hellebuyck, where he's older, and you're bringing him in on the contract for a couple of years. So I don't mind the risk. I think it's always a risk with a goaltender, especially if you're a team. The thing with Toronto is you're bringing in a goalie without the full roster completed, and that's going to be the part that just who knows with it. You know, what does Toronto look like?
JR, what have you seen? What give me somebody that wowed you, maybe somebody that you're like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, no, Alex hit on a lot. I think, you know, we saw some change. I think the one thing, it's tough, like you see a Vegas, you know, re-sign an Anderson. Some of these teams, you know, they're kind of pot committed to some of these guys because they traded for them, and maybe they're not playing well, and then they give them a $6 million or 6-year, 7-year deal, kind of to keep the AAV down. And I don't know, it's just what intrigued me about some of the things that we saw is what didn't happen. Like, what if a Werenski goes to Dallas?
Or Hellebuyck to Buffalo. Yeah,
or Hellebuyck to Buffalo. So I think what teams did made kind of some sense because that's what you expected them to do. But to me, the more interesting part is, you know, what could have been in some certain situations.
Well, and to that point, like, that's why I think this free agency is still interesting to me, because it doesn't feel like it's done yet.
Yeah.
Like, on the blue side, I really wonder if they're interested in this Nikishin cat from Carolina, because the name keeps popping up. Friedman reported that again on Monday, but Hellebuyck's name is still out there. You've got Werenski's name that's still out there. You've got Matthew Nyes, whose name was floating around. Dylan Larkin with Detroit is still out there. Like, to me, this offseason doesn't feel done yet in the NHL. Like, it still feels like you're going to see a couple of big moves happen between now and training camp. It's just kind of like that calm before the storm that sets in.
Also, the East is freaking loaded.
Yeah. Well, you have to when Florida keeps pulling off the magic.
Well, absolutely so. But I mean, that is going to be an absolute dogfight over there to see who can come out of that. I mean, it's going to be really, really entertaining to watch.
You've got Washington now that is about as loaded as you can ask for.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you guys about the Caps and what you think of all the moves in which that they made. And then, we get the news late last week that AO is coming back for at least one more year. What do you guys think about the Caps?
I think they did an awesome job. And this is knowing that they made the deal with the Blues, but Kyrou on top of Alex Tuch, on top of Boone Jenner, and you bring Ovechkin back, they just reshaped their top. They might be the deepest offense next to Florida in the National Hockey League this season. Wow. I mean, Kyrou might be a third-line player for them. They've got Wilson and Leonard and two of the Protas brothers, and now you've got Ovechkin back. If their goaltending and defense can hold up, that's going to be a dangerous team. Now, some of those guys like that Alex Tuch contract, that's going to hurt in a couple of years. Sure. I don't think he's going to be that type of player, but you sign it for the now, and I think you try and win with Alex Ovechkin as long as you can. Yeah. And then once he decides to call it a career or stay in Russia, now you've got a roster that can replace him.
Yeah, the biggest thing with Alex, is the those players have done it before. It's not like you're bringing in guys who you're hoping and praying that they can get it done. Tuch's done it in his career. Kyrou's done it in his career. It's just a matter of them getting settled in and comfortable and producing there. And then, I think we were even talking, will Ovechkin come back a couple weeks ago, and it looks like the plan all along was for him to come back. I like the fact that, which, he's made a lot of money in his career. It's kind of a situation. Hey, Alex, let us try to figure out what we're going to pay Tuch, what we're going to pay this guy. We got Kyrou's salary coming in. We got this and that. So once we get all that settled in, we might have $5 million, $6 million. Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah,
and then we'll do performance bonuses with you, buddy. So your AV will be low, but we'll pay you.
I feel like, and I'm going to get a nasty email about this, but I feel like this is the absolute, almost perfect world and situation for Jordan Kyrou to go into. Yeah. He's not going to have to be the number one guy, the number two, the number three. He's number 6 there. You say he could potentially be on the third line. For him, as long as he's getting his minutes, I bet you that's perfect for him. He does not have to, he just gets to be the quiet guy in which that he is, and there is a ton of other talent on that team. That dude's going to have a really good season. Yeah. He's going to have a really good season. That is a fantastic place.
If the opportunity's there to where he gets the chances and the minutes to play, he's going to be a guy that could put up 40 goals. And I think people are going to be upset about that. I just don't think that was going to happen here because of what you said. To me, the best thing that happened to Kyrou was the Alex Tuch signing, because Alex Tuch signed for that massive of a contract. And you're right, he's done it before. But to me, and I'm just putting myself in a Washington Capitals fan seat, if Tuch doesn't perform versus Kyrou not performing, what's the one thing I'm going to say? Tuch's getting paid how much money?
Right.
Versus Kyrou, who still is making $8 million, but I don't think you're talking about that as much. You're going to be talking about Tuch, the guy that you signed. Now, if he performs and Kyrou doesn't, then that gets to be a little difficult. But that's why, to me, it was never going to happen for him here, because you were always going to be viewed as the guy that's supposed to be the savior. Yeah. Now, you aren't that in Washington. You're 6 players deep before you worry about what Jordan Kyrou's doing. So it really is a perfect situation. And I think for him to be able to go somewhere and just play your game and not have so many people questioning your every single move, man, that's going to benefit his career too. Yeah,
and you're absolutely right about that. He is in a great situation now. The only thing is, Jordan Kyrou can't just assume that it's going to happen for him. He has to go grab it, which you would hope after the season he had last year, and you would hope after the trade that it would be a kick in the pants. It's just, if he can and wants to be a 40-goal scorer, it's got to be showing up on a consistent basis. It's got to doing the other parts of the game. It's got to be, okay, I've had 2 or 3 coaches who want this out of me. That's a lot of coaches. Now we got a really good coach in Carberry, coach of the year, right?
Yeah.
And, let's listen to it. Let's take the staff. Let's take these ideas that they're giving me and implement and be that player. I can show everybody in St. Louis. I can show Doug Armstrong, Alex Steen. I can show the fans that this is who I am. Yeah. And he's got that opportunity. He can't just show up in Washington and think, okay, I got a great situation. situation here. I got 6 guys ahead of me who are going to take the fall if things don't work. Like, go be that leader that everybody was hoping for you to be in St. Louis.
Absolutely. Let's do this. Let's take one final break. Come back. I want to throw just a couple of quick questions at you guys, and then we'll wrap up. We have our first ever podcast meeting after this with the bosses.
Big time. We're going big.
All right. Final segment, Last Minute Blues podcast coming your way next. All right, guys. So I just want to ask you about a few of the guys that are still out there. We kind of talked about them a little bit ago, but I just kind of want to get your general sense. One, even if Connor Hellebuyck starts the year in Winnipeg, do you think that he finishes the year in Winnipeg? Do you think there's still a chance that he could get moved to the Sabres?
I think there's a chance. I don't think he gets moved. If he starts the season with Winnipeg, I don't think he gets moved until next offseason.
Okay.
Because I don't think teams are going to pay the roster commodity that is asked. And I think if Winnipeg has a bad year, they'll be more willing to part with him for just draft pick compensation. So I think he stays in Winnipeg, and then I think he's gone next offseason.
All right.
That makes sense. I mean, I always think that there's opportunity that something still could happen this offseason. Like,
I hope it does.
He really wants out. So, I think they're going to try to push that envelope, but Alex is right. I don't think it would be in season. I think if it doesn't happen this offseason, it'll be another year.
Look, for how much I despise the Team USA guys and everything they're doing right now, that's what I'm rooting for, just for personal reasons of Winnipeg not being good next year.
Right.
Get Hellebuyck out. You don't have to worry about it. Send him to the East. We'll be fine.
What's going to happen with this whole Dylan Larkin thing in Detroit?
I don't think Yzerman's going to move him. Unless somebody pays the actual commodity that it's worth. And there's only so many teams I think that his list is willing to go to. Yeah. And the report yesterday was he's not willing to expand it. So
it's still 4 teams.
Yeah. So it's like Larkin and Yzerman playing a game of trade chicken where nobody wants to do anything. And I don't know if I want to play that game with Steve Yzerman, because Yzerman's just going to be like, cool, man, come back. Fine. You'll get booed every single night you're here, and people are going to despise you for everything that you did. Oh, well, you'll come back and we'll move forward until somebody gets desperate enough for him. And I don't blame Yzerman. If I'm Yzerman, I'm doing that. I'll take the brunt of the criticism versus me giving him up for pennies on the dollar like we've seen for some of these guys that demand out.
Well, you just can't, because if you do that, you're back in rebuild city almost, or retool city, whatever the hell you call it.
Yeah, and if he gets pennies on the dollar, which he's not going to do, like Alex said, Yzerman's not going to be in that seat in 3 years.
Yeah.
And his legacy as GM will be 10 years without playoffs and sold Larkin for pennies on the dollar. He can't have that happen. I think at the end of the day, it's, he's going to be with Minnesota, and Detroit will get something really close to what they want, and his worth and his value. That's the deal that probably makes the most sense. And I think Detroit at some point is going to have to make that move.
All right. And then finally here. Okay. So last week, Zach Werenski wanted out of Columbus. For a couple days, it was intense. We thought it was going to happen. We thought he was going to get moved. It was going to be another one of these big deals. All right. But then, supposedly, there was some kind of meeting between him and Don Waddell, the general manager. Then they both put out dual statements on the same day. So what is going on with Werenski? Does he actually really want to be in Columbus beyond the trade deadline? Beyond his contract? Is this a guy that you see being moved? And were you guys shocked that he didn't go to Dallas? Why would you not want to go to Dallas? You could be the missing piece that finally pushes that team over. I was incredibly surprised that he wouldn't go there.
Yeah.
A no tax state on top of it?
The Dallas part surprised the hell out of me, but then it's like, who was the Team USA guy he was going to play with? They don't even have Robertson would be it, but he didn't make that roster. These guys are wanting to play with their buddies. And I mean, if I'm Werenski, yeah, I think he even said as much. He's just uncertain if he wants to be in Columbus beyond his contract, which, I mean, I can't blame him. That team's gone nowhere. But I'm also, if I'm him, if I'm getting traded, I'm going where I want to go. And the Dallas part surprises me, but maybe it is solely off of, because we heard that he was willing to go to Toronto. That's what the report was. Well, there's Austin Matthews, right? Like, I think these guys want to play with their buddies off of the roster. And that's where you wonder, was Dallas trying to get Dylan Larkin and then bring in Zach Werenski because those guys are buddies? Does that how that trade happened? So I don't know what happens with this one. It was a weird ending to what on draft night was like, oh yeah, he's going, there's going to be a trade. And then all of a sudden it's, no, I love Columbus and I'm going to be here for the rest of my contract, and then I'll decide beyond that. Like, that's just putting Columbus in a terrible spot.
It just seems still very up in the air.
But that's why those no movement clauses, man, like, they dictate everything. We can be critical about Doug for not giving them out, and there's certain guys that I think deserve it, like Alex Pietrangelo, because that's not a guy you were trying to move. But man, watching all of these guys with their no movement clauses, they basically hold the team ransom and say, like, we're not going to those places unless you send us where I want to go, and then you get the package that you're going to get.
Yeah, and I just think that situation with Werenski, it just got so emotional that, there was no way for it to have like a good ending there for a couple of days. And also, if you're reading the reports, they say that he had told Columbus, I'm not going to the West. So once Columbus works out the trade with Dallas, which he has no knowledge is even being discussed, then Columbus comes to him and says, hey, we got to deal with Dallas. Do what?
Right.
I didn't say I was going. I told you we're not going west.
Yeah.
So it might not have been a, hey, I don't want to go to that team. Now you're taking a little stand and saying, like, I told you this. Listen to, type situation. So, if it's a year from now, would he go to Dallas? Maybe he would. Like Alex said, these guys all want to buddy up and play together. But obviously Dallas has a great team, and he would have made them, right there.
I feel like this offseason has been the most exciting offseason that I could remember in the NHL.
Free agency sucks, and so you had to go to the trade market.
Yeah, but like, it feels as though the NHL is starting to take a bit of a page from the NFL, in that I feel like there's always something that we're talking about even throughout the offseason. It doesn't seem like there's very many, a week or more that go by where there's not something that's popping off, and that just feels very good for the sport in general, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, like, you're continuing
overall
to build
popularity and things.
Yeah,
right?
You're continuing to build with the notoriety, and now when you have stuff going on all the time, like, it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next 4 weeks, because now is like, you had the boom of the first week of free agency, and now you don't really have a whole lot of name recognition on the market. So now it's going to be, do trades happen? And if no trades happen, then it gets a little bit more silent. But I mean, them releasing the roster in July and the season beginning a little earlier this year, it does feel like there's only about 3 to 4 weeks of a quiet period in the NHL versus what it used to be, to where free agency was done day one and then everybody basically shut it down and went into their cabins until training camp.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of two things. It's the cap going up, gives teams more flexibility to make some moves, and then also it seems like players, and we touched on a few of them, Werenski, go back to Brady, Tkachuk, these guys are just willing to, like, make it known, I'm ready to jump ship. And I mean, let's not pretend that for years maybe some guys thought about that. Hey, it'd be nice to play with this guy, or be nice to go play in this city, but you still stuck with your team, and in 2 years you got your next big deal and you stayed put, and you never moved. But these guys are making no bones about it, that they just want to go move and play with the contenders. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Is, when every list that comes out right now is Florida, Vegas,
Dallas.
Carolina, Dallas, Minnesota. Like, there's 4 or 5 teams that everybody wants to go to.
Yeah.
Man, it's just been absolutely fantastic to watch. And I just found myself just completely engaged in this. It's just been really great. All right, so we got to get out of here. We're going to wrap up this episode of the Last Minute Blues podcast. For Alex, JR, I'm Donny Fandango. Thank you as always for listening and watching. And hey, if you know a hockey fan that doesn't listen or watch the Last Minute Blues podcast, why don't you spread the love? Spread the love. Help us out.
We're here for them.
Absolutely. Hockey fans everywhere.
Hockey therapy.
Last Minute Blues podcast. Thanks very much for listening and watching. And as always, let's go Blues.
Thanks for tuning into the Last Minute Blues podcast on your home for Blues hockey, 101 ESPN.